All right, welcome to Cwic Show today. My name is Greg Mattson. I'm your host. Today is April 24th, 2026. We are covering a few different topics. One is more information on the young women's names, where that comes from, the program that's actually being implemented, a strange interview, I think, from Peggy Fletcher Stack from the Salt Lake Tribune with Emily Belle-Freeman, a podcast that was put out by the General Young Women's Presidency that I went all the way through, and just pulling these things together. There's some interesting dynamics that come about from this. Also, are Latter-day Saints the youngest Christian denomination out there? New data says it is. This episode is brought to you by the Warriors of Teancum Men's Retreat. Very, very pumped about this. This is August 13th through 15th in Rush Valley, Utah. This is going to be a fantastic, fun, transformational event. Interestingly, a lot of women have signed up their husbands and their sons, their adult sons, for this program as well. We've got older men bringing their adult sons and sons-in-law. I will be presenting Chad Hymas, that the Wall Street Journal called one of the top 10 inspirational people in the world. Gail Pooley, who has been on the Jordan Peterson podcast and teaches a course on Peterson Academy. We're going to have equine leadership development with the horses. We have amazing activities like playing capture the flag in off-road vehicles at night. There's skeet shooting, fishing, firesides. It's going to be a fantastic event. To find out more, to go to cwicmedia.com. That's CWIC media.com. Go up to the top to Warriors, find out more, and register. I would love to see you there. Here we go. So here, President Emily Belle-Freeman is quoted here saying, "It became really important that these were not ornamental names." That makes sense. "But names that defined a purpose." That makes sense. "And the purpose needed to be defined not by society or culture, but through Scripture." So they analyze, this is now not quoted, right? They analyze women in Scriptures and what, this is quoted, qualities they represented that could then become defined for the young women of our day and time. Now, here's where it gets interesting, right? This, again, is not in quotes, so it'd be interesting to know if this is actually what President Emily Belle-Freeman thinks. I mean, where is Peggy getting this from? So this is not in quotes. It says, "The energetic leader believes the new monikers will provide teenage Latter-day Saint girls with a sense of their worth as partners in a church with continued gender inequities." That would be very interesting to know. Is that what she actually believes, that there are gender inequities? Are we talking about the priesthood? Devout boys at the same age, for instance, hold priesthood offices and are called deacons, teachers, and priests. Okay, so that is what the implication is that Peggy Fletcher Stack is giving here, that President Emily Belle-Freeman believes that this is something that needs to be, give sense of worth to young women, because in the church there are gender inequities. I would like someone to ask Peggy Fletcher Stack if this is actually what she believes, or rather, if this is actually what was said by the young women's president. She goes on, without quoting, she hopes girls will see themselves taking an active rather than passive role. Again, that's not in quotes. So is this something that was based on a discussion? There is some of this in the podcast. I watched the entire podcast of the whole Young Women's Presidency. I didn't hear anything about gender inequities, at least not that phrase. I think that's very much being written in as an implication by the journalist here, which I think is extremely inappropriate and is putting words in a way that is manipulative into her mouth, into the president's mouth. Same thing here with rather than a passive role. In other words, does Emily Belle-Freeman think that women have a passive role in the church, which is preposterous? But at least Peggy Fletcher Stack seems to think so, and that's not a surprise at all. But here's how she words this. I mean, look at this closely here, right? Let's highlight this. How does she do this? How does the journalist do this? She goes in and out of quotes. She says she hopes girls will see themselves taking an active rather than a passive role in, then she goes into quotes, building up the kingdom, and then out of quotes says, the young women president said. Wow. That is, my guess is it's extremely dishonest journalism. That's my guess. Now, it could be that Emily Belle-Freeman said something very similar to this. But I didn't hear anything about that. I did hear her say things in the podcast that were along the lines of, these are not quiet names, right? These are active names. I don't know what she means by that, and maybe there's some inference there by Peggy Fletcher Stack. I think she takes it to an extreme, that she says they're not quiet names. That could mean a lot of things. But to an activist, it certainly means something specific, right? Now, the article goes on, and I like this part here. It says, it will better prepare them, in quotes now, to understand the doctrine of the church they belong to. I think this is key. We all need to focus more and more on the doctrine, and not on regurgitating things that are doctrine adjacent, or maybe very far from what the doctrine is. And they want, continuing the quote, and they want to be able to answer questions about it. That's fantastic. And when they see things online, they want to know what the answers are. And this curriculum is going to provide a space for that. I think that they're looking at what they're going to be talking about every week. I think that's a great focus. She's going to go over the 4 different things that they're going to focus on and that they're going to do during the month, each and every month when this gets put into place. And then she's going to talk about for Strength of Youth pamphlet, which I think is excellent. There is something missing in this. I'll cover here also in just a second here. Here's the 4-week schedule of young women classes. They break down like this. The first Sunday will be a principle-based lesson that is going to work better if there is a doctrinal foundation under it. Okay, that is key. It's not only going to work better, it should be doctrinal, right? Principles are up here. It's like self-help stuff. It's good stuff, but it's not doctrinal stuff. So I think she's exactly right, and I'm glad that I see here she's separating what principles are and what doctrine is. Principles can be built on doctrine, but the doctrine is the key to the focus here. The second and third Sundays will be doctrinal topics meant to strengthen the principles that are taught on the first Sunday, and the lessons are actually not lessons. They are discussion guides. That sounds fantastic. Get them involved. I think that's great. This is actually very exciting. On the fourth Sunday, the classes will study women in Scripture and in church history. They will have statements that help them understand their roles and responsibilities as builders of faith, messengers of hope, and gatherers of light. The fourth Sunday is designed for them to start understanding their place and their purpose and their identity in God's plan. Okay, so I think that's great too, right? Go into the scriptures every month, 1 week a month, talk about maybe one or several different women in the scriptures and in church history, and talk about who they were, the differences that they made, etc. Here's my only concern. My only concern on this is how that is going to be manipulated by certain teachers, right? And how you might, now that's the case with anything. How are you going to take this and manipulate this into something else? And how is, well, let's just cut to the chase. Is there going to be discussion about these women that they're studying as wives and as mothers? Because that is the cultural trend, is to push away from this. There is not a single thing in this article and in the long podcast from the 3 women in the Young Women's Presidency. There was not a single mention about helping these women become good wives and good mothers, about their marriages. about their destiny and legacy as mothers. Nothing. And it's not just for women, right? It's like, I hope we're doing that with young men too. The same thing. Is there anything in there that is being discussed? Is there a focus on your role as being a husband and a father as a young man? Because that is kind of what it's all about. And that's the only thing I kind of wish would have been mentioned in here. As the birth rate has dropped to historic lows, right? The lowest it's ever been. I think it's important to go out and push against this. And it starts with the youth. Yes, it starts with the youth. Are you looking forward to having a family? And is there much discussion on this? I just one thing, just one little caveat here that I would say, but I think the program looks fantastic the way it is. Now, what is interesting here? Well, let me backtrack one more thing here, right? This is something else that is mentioned. It says Latter-day Saint young women across the globe face similar challenges such as anxiety and loneliness. Men have the same thing, Freeman said, but this is in quotes, but I see young women all over the world who want to know they belong to something bigger. I think that's important, that they're part of making a difference, that they're part of a good cause. I think that is crucial. But again, the primary place to belong is family. We can't remove that. And she's not removing it. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying that we've got to nail that down. We've moved into such this move the other side of the pendulum away from, well, you're not just, barefoot in the kitchen, so to speak, as a housewife, into, hey, you're a girl boss and you have all the fulfillment in the world waiting for you out there in the world, not in your home, in the world. And I just think we need to be careful in how and understand and remember how all of these young men and women are being messaged to on social media and the internet and school. And we should be going against the grain on this, right? It's not just, the birth rate within the churches. Yes, it's higher, but all we're doing is just going down the same road as the rest of culture. It's a road to destruction. So why not, instead of just following a little bit behind, hey, we're a little better than the rest of the world. We're not sliding down as far as you, but we are sliding down as fast as you. And instead of that, why don't we try and help make the turn in this and get ahead of it all with the youth, is just my thought on this. And speaking of this, let's go to the birth rate and look what we find here. And this is, again, about, are we going to create girl bosses? Is that what really the focus is? Is that what equality really looks like? It does to some people. This is what feminism has done. It is focused on get women out of the home, get them to have fewer children, and have them focus on their own personal fulfillment out in the world. And you do that through careerism. Right, so let's just take a look at this. This is fascinating, but obvious at the same time. Look at this chart. It came out from Family Studies. Fertility is very low for all working women. Shocker. Total fertility rate for women in each occupation group and survey decade. So that's going down here. You're going from 1972 to 2024, 50 years. And you have the birth rate there, the total fertility rate there from left to right, 1972 to 2024, and where it ends up. Look at the top number there, the top line, that green line. That green line is non-working women, and that is their fertility rate. Now you can see it's dropping, right? It's coming down. It's still above replacement rate, actually. For non-working women, they're still having more than 2.1 kids in their lifetime. Right now, look at all the other numbers here. These are the numbers that are for different levels of work. And they are actually, to some degree, some have come up, some have come down. But look at that distinction. It's very, very clear. So if we are in a society that is completely pushing careerism on women, which we are, I mean, you can go to BYU, for example, and say, I'm getting into whatever program I'm going into over there, of course, and they should be. The school, the department is going to be saying, hey, we want to make you the best, whatever it is that you're focusing on. We want to make you the best accountant. We want to make you the best business finance person. We want to make you the best teacher. We want to make, et cetera. And we want to get you placed if you want to go to grad school. Well, our school looks better when we're placing more people in grad school. So how are they going to operate? What are they going to do? It's a very difficult thing to deal with, right? At the same time, and this is difficult because there's another walking the edge of the sword on this, is that women that go to college get married more often. Now they're getting married later, but at least they're getting married much more than the women that do not go to college. So there's that to look at also. So the ideal, it seems to be, for those that are having more kids is that they're going to college. Women are going to college. Maybe they're working for a little while and then they're not working. And they're the ones that are ending up having the kids. Over at the Free Press, one of my favorite publications, there's an article by Katie Miller, who is the wife of Stephen Miller. And she says this on her podcast. She says, America, I'm quoting on this, America is in a full-scale birth rate collapse. This is not alarmism. This is the number one problem in the world that we are facing. We just don't have the effects of it fully yet today, although we do culturally in our priorities and in how we're developing kids and family structure. But the bottom of all this is going to fall out very quickly as the boomers die off. We're in a difficult position here. But the bottom is going to collapse on this as our population shrinks. Now, America is in a full-scale rate collapse, she says. Our biological, being women's, biological destiny is to have babies, not slave behind desks chasing careers while our civilization dies. Look, I believe that. I believe that is true. That doesn't mean everybody needs to do that. I don't believe that either. I think that women should have choice. I want them to have choice. But until we instill in our culture the ideal of family and kids and women who are focused on their kids, now maybe they've got a part-time job, maybe they can help out economically with a job that's very flexible and they can work from home and make it work there. Those are things that I think, technology is allowing us to do. And maybe we need to move more toward that if there has to be an economic support from the wife, from the mother. But unless we get a larger portion of women that are focused on the kids and having children, we're in a lot of trouble. And that's not misogynist. It is simply fact. And kids do better. This is not just about the women. It's not about the parents. It's not about the lifestyle of the man and the woman. It's about the kids. And that is just rarely brought up. I saw another article that was actually from Family Studies that was arguing against some of the things that Brad Wilcox and others had written and talked about with this birth rate discrepancy of non-working women and working women, where they had said that, the Brad Wilcox had said, well, maybe we need to return to a traditional male breadwinner, okay? I'm for that to some degree. The argument in the article was going against that, saying that's not traditional. It didn't used to be that way. But that's not really true either, right? I mean, imagine a farm and the man is building the house, he's building the barn, and he's out working the land, working the crops, clearing the land, working with the animals, and the woman is just as busy, right? And she is doing things. She's got to do the laundry on a rock of some sort or whatever she's going to be using. Most importantly, she has to have food preparation so that there is actually food on the table that is not going to make you sick or kill you. And of course, anything else that goes on within the house, because you're going to be more around the smaller kids. That is how gender roles are created. It's not oppression. It's It's biology. And too often we go back in time and look at, well, women have been oppressed the entire... No, what happened is technology. Technology is what changed things. Domestic technology is what changed things. And the thing that changed things more than anything else, I believe, culturally, maybe AI will take it over. I don't know. But I mean, even beyond the internet, even beyond social media, what changed the world more than anything else is the pill. Go back and look at the fertility rate and marriage statistics going back to the 60s. Right? The pill came around in the late 1950s, was in full use by the late 1960s, and you'll just see the graph just go boom. That is going to be, I believe, it is to date the largest, the biggest, most consequential technology that has been brought about. Now, that doesn't mean I don't believe in it. That doesn't mean I'm against birth control. I'm not. It just means I'm stating a fact. That's it. I'm just stating the fact on it. The article continues here. Emma Waters, author and policy analyst at the Heritage Foundation, posted that girl boss feminism has a body count and its birth rates. Right? So it's a negative body count, in a sense, is what they're talking about. Body count is a big topic these days. Ina Stepman, I haven't heard her name in a while, of the Independent Women's Forum, argued that the rise of the professional woman is a result of taxpayer subsidies and policies that discriminate against men. Get rid of those unjust incentives and penalties, she suggests, and more women will pursue traditional family life. Sure, there are different things that we can do in structure that will change these types of things. But I believe it's more about the ideologies. It's more about what is taught. That is the only thing we have to fight against, honestly, against convenience, against technology, and the economy. Right? And those things have changed things more than anything else, even feminism. Feminism has changed so much, and it is so powerful, and we're so bathed in the ideology of feminism and critical theory. But even then, the biggest changes have been technology. The biggest changes in our structure today of family and the way we work and what we consider traditional and what is modern all has to do with technology. And those are the biggest creations and changes. Feminism and the protests and all of these things were not the great major changes that happened, even going up into the 19th Amendment. I mean, one of the big things that started to change was convenience for women in the home. That started to change an immense amount. And again, the pill. It allowed for, pro or con, it allowed for women to go out into the workforce and not worry as much about kids. And they could plan it. They'd never been able to do that before. So technology is the real driver. However, we better deal with the birth rate or we're going to be in trouble. All right, I want to go to this last point here, and this is on the church. And this comes from Ryan Burge, who does all of the religious graphs. He does a fabulous job of this. But I want to look at a couple of these graphs that he just put out on his Substack recently. Look at this graph. All right, look at that green line again. Look at that green line. This is the general composition of the General Social Survey, 1972 to 2024. So again, we're talking about 52 years here, 53 years. And what you're going to see here is phenomenal. This is the amount this is the predominance, the percentage of each generation. And so you look at the different generations going all the way back to the greatest generation that's in blue. You can see that dropping down because it wasn't huge and because they're all dying off, right? So the percentage is very low down to 2016 and it's practically zero, right? There's hardly anybody from that generation left. The silent generation is the red coming across and going down. That's my parents. The boomers, that's the green. Look at this. Every other the first two, you've got the greatest and the silent generations, the blue and the red, they are dropping down, right? Smaller and smaller percentage of the total amount of people. Now look at the boomers. They peak all the way up at nearly 45% in around 1985. And 45%, now these are 18-year generations. That's how it goes, right? It's 18 years. So in 1985, almost half of the population in the U.S. was boomers. Almost half the population came from 18 years. A total of those 18 years, people born in those 18 years. That's incredible. The boomers are so large that as you follow that green number over and see it come down, it's not until about 2018 that they finally are not the number one generation population-wise, percentage-wise in the U.S. All the way over to 2018. And who overcomes them at that point? It's not Gen X. Nope. Gen X, my generation, the lost generation, you can see why. They have always been in the shadow of the boomers. Even today, to this date, there has never been a Gen X president of the United States. It's really odd, right? They're boomers. They're all boomers. And so, or beyond, boomers or the silent generation. So now as I look over here at Gen X, see, they're still down. Still today, Gen X is third, the third largest generation. Number 2 is that purple line going up, which is the millennials. There are more millennials today than Gen Xers. And that's the way it typically would work. Right? They come up as the next generation and take their spot, etc. But here's what, then you've got Gen Z here at the end there where they're just still moving up here, and they need to wait for all those boomers to die off and others before they become a larger percentage of the country. But what is interesting here is when you look at this with religion, this is the boomers that have dominated the pews. So this is the generation for those that are sitting in the pews in Christianity. Right? So look at this again. The green, you had the greatest generation was the top 1% up, and then boom, no pun intended. And then in about 1982, right? In 1982, the boomers take it over. They drop for some reason here in the mid 1980s, pop back up. The silent generation then takes its run for a very short period of time, it looks like just a year. And then it's the boomers. Boom. From then on, it's the boomers going right into about 1987, 1988. The boomers since 1987, 88 have been the highest percentage of those found in a pew until today. That's incredible. And the reason that's important is well, if they are still the highest percentage and have been for 40 years, what happens when they leave? What is going to happen? Do we have what should be at that point, mostly because they're 18 years, it should be the millennials, really, that should be taking, not Gen X, that should be taking over for the boomers. The Gen X are just kind of this subset of the boomers in a way. They're always going to be overshadowed. We will always have been overshadowed by the boomers. But millennials are supposed to be the ones that are going to take over. Well, where are the millennials? Where do we find them? They are this purple line here, right? They are the purple line here. And that's the percentage. Now, obviously, their number will grow as the boomers die off. And as Gen Xers get older, I suppose, I don't know, maybe they'll become more religious. The problem is they're not as religious. Millennials are not nearly as religious. And we can see that from the following graph. In this graph, you can see that the boomers have stayed steady in the amount of weekly attendance all the way going back to when they were in their 30s. Right when they get to 30 years old, they're at 31%, and they remain pretty much there all the way until they're in their 75s, until today. Right? They've stayed steady in weekly church attendance, which is remarkable. Okay? You go down and you say, okay, well, where are the millennials? Well, of course, they're younger, but you've started a much lower base. When you go all the way back to 18, they're starting off at only 19% as compared to 22% with the With the boomers, they're up to 20%. We're at the age of 30, where boomers were up at 31% and remained. So unless there's a radical change with the millennials, you're going to have every generation has been less and less churchy, less and less of an attendance and involved with church. Now, here's the interesting thing about Latter-day Saints. Going up to this graph, take a look at this graph. This is all of the green represents the denominations, the Christian denominations that are dominated by boomers, where they have the largest generation within each tradition. This is insane. In all of these, it's almost always, you have the Church of Christ, where they have 7 different years since 2008 to 2024, 7 different years where it has been other generations have been larger than the boomers. And then way down in non-denominational evangelical, in 2010, you had another generation that was more than the boomers for a year. That's a blip. That doesn't count. You can't even count that statistically. But look at the top. From 2008 to 2024, you do not have boomers in a single year dominating as the largest group of people with the Latter-day Saints. That is incredible. That is amazing. What that means is that for those that are active as Latter-day Saints, unless there's a larger drop-off and entropy, right, some spiritual entropy that enters into the church, you're going to have more members of the church as Latter-day Saints. And the other denominations that are all dominated by boomers, as those boomers die off, are going to have a harder time. They're going to struggle more than the Latter-day Saints in total attendance. But this surprises me a little bit. And I was thinking, okay, well, maybe it's because Latter-day Saints have so many more kids than others do. That's dropping, but they have more kids than most others do, but so do Catholics. And maybe the Catholics aren't quite where we are, I suppose, but they don't have a single year since 2008 where boomers have not been the number one generation of churchgoers. So that is a stark difference. That tells you that the Latter-day Saints are in this, and including these major denominations, including non-denominational, that the Latter-day Saints are the youngest sect of Christianity, it appears. And I wonder what that means for the future. Thanks for listening.